If you grew up believing that a steady paycheck was the goal, that you had benefits and a salary, and you were finally safe, you were taught that for a reason. But in an economy shaped by automation and rising costs, wages don't protect you in the way that they used to. They just help you to keep up. And teachers feel this because you're in careers built on service, not ownership. So in this video, we're going to talk about why economy alone was never the full plan and what actually creates stability in the age of AI. You know what no one tells you when you've decided to dedicate your life to meaningful work? That good intentions don't always pay the bills. I learned this the hard way when I joined a nonprofit that had a beautiful mission, but it had chaotic finances. Within weeks of starting, I discovered that some colleagues hadn't been paid on time. And when they finally called us into a room to explain that we'd have to wait even longer for our paychecks, they framed it like we're all in this together, like our shared commitment to the cause should make financial instability feel noble. But here's what I realized in that moment. Just because an organization has a good heart doesn't mean that it has healthy finances. And just because you show up with excellence doesn't mean that you're protected from their poor planning. A paycheck isn't protection, it's permission. And it's permission that can be revoked at any time. Let me take you back to that specific moment. I had read about this nonprofit online, and I felt like it had a mission that I could really stand behind. I wanted to use my skills as an executive assistant to support work that mattered. So I did my research, wrote a heartfelt cover letter, and sent in my resume. After about 2 weeks, I had my interviews, got offered the job, and I accepted. I came in early and I stayed late. I was all in. But within 3 weeks, I started noticing some things. The finances were an absolute mess. Colleagues had mentioned to me that some people hadn't been paid on time. I started wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. And then they called us into a meeting to brainstorm ideas about bringing in more money. That's when they dropped the, "We may have to pay you a little bit later than we planned." I was shocked. But what really stayed with me was how they framed it. Like our dedication to the mission should somehow make this acceptable. That night, I went home and I wrote my resignation letter. I told them I'd have to file for unemployment unless they could tell me when I would actually get paid. They couldn't. So I resigned and filed for unemployment. I had some savings in Bitcoin, but I was terrified about not having consistent income. So I took the first job I could find at a daycare. The director who hired me told me I was overqualified, but that I'd be able to get a raise quickly and that I could lead enrichment classes for the kids for higher pay. I love children, so I happily accepted. It felt like a safe landing, except the director was fired within 6 weeks of me starting. Why? Because she had promised raises to several other teachers that the organization never intended to honor. Suddenly, I was back in the exact same situation again, working somewhere with financial mismanagement, but this time in a chaotic environment with too many children per teacher and constant staff turnover. My health started to fall apart. My cortisol levels were through the roof. My doctor looked at my results and told me that something had to change. 5 months in, I had to make a difficult decision. Pay $5,000 for my surgery that my insurance barely covered, or leave the job and try to heal myself naturally. I chose to leave. Fortunately, my health improved, but now I had no full-time income again. Eventually, I found a part-time job with an absolutely wonderful family, caring for their child. It was peaceful, it was healthy, and then the pandemic hit. Everyone's under quarantine. That meant no income. I had to sell my Bitcoin just to get by. But here's the thing. I was so grateful I had it because if I didn't, I don't know what I would have done. Here's what that experience taught me, and what I think every teacher, every person really working in a mission-driven space needs to understand. First, just because an organization has good intentions doesn't mean that their finances are healthy. People who work in spaces centered in care, education, and service often operate in environments where financial health is treated as secondary to the mission. But the truth is, those two things can't be separated. An organization's finances need to be strong enough to honor the people doing the work. If they're asking you to sacrifice financial stability for the sake of the cause, that's not a commitment. That's exploitation dressed up as purpose. You deserve to work somewhere that values your work enough to pay you and consistently on time. And if that's not happening, it's not your job to fix it by working for free or waiting indefinitely. Your work has value. Protect it by looking out for yourself first, not by submitting to martyrdom for the sake of the cause, even if the cause is a good one. Second, you can only plan for what you can control, but you can't control what other people do on their end. I was fiscally responsible. I showed up, did excellent work, and held up my end of the agreement. But what I couldn't control was their cash flow problems, their lack of planning, or their decision to prioritize expenses over payroll. What I could control was my response. It's unfortunate that the organization didn't have its finances together, that the job could disappear unexpectedly, that the economy shifts in ways that I didn't anticipate. That's why building financial options isn't about being pessimistic. It's about being prepared. It's about making sure that when somebody else drops the ball, you're not left scrambling. Third, you need to set aside as many forms of income as you can so that when disaster hits, you have some options within a reasonable time period. I'm not talking about working through jobs to burn yourself out. I'm talking about intentionally creating income streams that don't all depend on one employer, one industry, or one economic moment. For me, it meant moving away from a job that was damaging my health. It meant being thankful that I'd been consistent with my savings and my budget for years. It meant learning about investing and digital assets so that my money could work for me when I couldn't. And when that nonprofit fell apart, I had choices. I could walk away without completely panicking because I had something set aside. And during a desperate situation like what happened in 2020, I could sell an asset that I needed to survive. That's the real freedom that I want for you. Not the fantasy of never having to work again, but the reality of having options for when things horribly go wrong. So here's the shift I want to leave you with today. A paycheck is not a protection plan. It's an agreement that can be broken at any time by circumstances you can't always control. What protects you is ownership of your skills, your time, and your financial strategy for your future. The question isn't whether your employer has good intentions. The question is, do you have options? If you found this helpful, I'd love for you to explore what your natural approach to wealth building is. Head over to my website, balancemuse.com, and take the free Wealth Archetype quiz. It'll help you understand your strengths and where to focus where you start building your life with more financial breathing room. And if you want more conversations like this one, subscribe to my channel. I'm here to help you move from being career dependent to calm ownership, one thoughtful step at a time. But even with your own plan taken care of, there are others that are going to be needing help going through this significant change. And that role has always belonged to educators. In the next video, we're going to talk about why your skills are actually becoming more valuable outside of traditional institutions, and how the world is quietly moving towards mentorships, apprenticeships, and community-based learning, because the future of education doesn't look like more classrooms. It looks like more guides. That's all for today. Until next time, take care.